The wind that morning carried the smell of dust, sage, and old fear. It moved through the small frontier settlement like a warning, whispering along cracked wooden walls and empty corrals. People paused in their work when they saw her, a pale figure wrapped in a dark shawl, walking with her head lowered, as if the sun itself had learned to hunt her. In a land of bronze skin and burned horizons, she looked like a ghost that had lost its way. Some crossed themselves. Others spat on the ground. No one spoke her name aloud, because in that town, her name had become a bad omen. She had been born different, and in the old American frontier, different was dangerous. Her skin was white as river salt. Her hair shone like frost under moonlight. Her eyes, light and trembling, never seemed to belong to this land of fire and iron. From the day she could walk, people whispered that she was cursed. They said the sun rejected her. They said spirits had marked her at birth. Only her mother had ever touched her without fear, and when her mother died, the last shield between her and the world fell into the dirt with the coffin lid. Her father was a hard man, carved from bitterness and survival. The frontier had taught him that mercy was a luxury and fear was a tool. Each year the stairs grew heavier. Crops failed. A child fell ill. A horse broke its leg. Every misfortune found its way back to her pale shadow. At night, he drank and stared at the fire, listening to the town's rumors coil tighter around his home. By the time the Apache riders were seen near the mesas, he had already made his choice. The Apache were spoken of like storms. People said they rose from the desert without warning and vanished the same way. Stories painted them as ruthless, untouchable, and led by a warrior whose name was spoken only in low voices. They called him Red Hawk. Some said he had never lost a fight. Others claimed he carried the judgment of the old spirits in his eyes. To the settlers, he was fear-given flesh. To her father, he became a solution. When the bargain was struck, it was done without her voice. A pale daughter for peace. A marriage to bind blood and silent superstition. Her father told himself he was saving his land, his name, and what little respect he had left. He did not tell himself that he was trading his child to a man he himself feared. When he finally spoke to her, his words were flat, almost kind. It's like a man soothing a horse before letting go of the reins. She did not cry. Tears had long dried in her. She only nodded because nodding had become her way of surviving. As she was led away, she felt the town watching, relieved. The curse was leaving. The bad luck would go with her. No one asked what waited for her beyond the red hills. The journey to Apache land was long and quiet. The sun burned overhead, yet never touched her the way it touched the others. Warriors rode beside her, faces unreadable, eyes sharp. She sensed no cruelty in them, only distance. Still, every hoofbeat echoed with questions she was afraid to ask. What kind of man takes a woman no one else wants? What kind of home waits for a girl sent as payment? Red Hawk rode ahead. Tall and steady, his presence heavy as the mountains themselves. He did not look back at her, not once. His hair was dark as night, tied with feathers that moved with the wind. His body bore the marks of battles survived and storms endured. She had imagined a monster, because that was easier than imagining a man. Yet fear clung to her all the same. When they reached his land, the world changed. The air felt older, as if it remembered things the settlement had forgotten. Stone and sky met without fences. Fires burned low and steady. People watched her with curiosity, not hatred. Children did not hide. Elders did not turn away. It confused her more than cruelty ever could. Red Hawk dismounted and finally faced her. His eyes were dark, deep and calm, like water that had learned patience over centuries. He did not smile. He did not scowl. He studied her as one might study a sign left by fate. She waited for judgment, for anger, for disgust. None came. Instead, he spoke in a voice low and grounded, telling her she was under his roof now and under his protection. His home stood at the edge of the land, strong and simple. Not a palace, not a prison, just a place shaped by survival and purpose. As she crossed its threshold, her heart pounded, because thresholds were where lives changed and hers had already changed too many times. She expected rules spoken like chains. She expected silence thick with threat. What she found instead was quiet. Days passed. She was not touched, not questioned, not blamed. Red Hawk kept his distance, watching from afar, as if giving her space to breathe. The people brought her food and water without fear. At night, she lay awake, listening to drums echo through the land, wondering if this calm was only the pause before a storm. In her old home, she had been a burden. Here, she did not yet know what she was. Red Hawk carried his own weight of legend and expectation, a feared Apache leader bound to a woman the world had rejected. Two lives forced together by fear and superstition, standing on opposite edges of the same wound. One evening, as the sun sank red against the hills, Red Hawk stood at the doorway, his shadow stretching across the floor toward her. His face was unreadable, but something in his posture had changed. The air felt tight, like the moment before thunder breaks. She realized then that, whatever this union was meant to be, it had not yet begun. And as she met his gaze, with fear and a strange flicker of hope tangled in her chest, she understood that the story everyone believed about him, and the story everyone believed about her, could not both be true. Something was waiting to be revealed. Something that would either destroy her or finally set her free. The night after that moment passed without sleep. She lay on a woven mat, staring at the dark beams above her, listening to the breath of the land. The wind spoke through the grass. Fire cracked somewhere beyond the walls. Every sound felt louder here, as if the earth itself was awake and watching. Back in the settlement, nights had been filled with whispers and locked doors. Here, the silence carried weight, not threat, but something deeper she could not yet name. By morning, she rose before the sun. Habit had taught her that being unseen was safer. She stepped outside and felt the cold bite her pale skin. The camp was already stirring. Smoke lifted straight into the sky. Horses stamped the ground. Life moved with purpose, not panic. A woman with sharp eyes and long gray braids noticed her standing alone. This woman was called Iron Willow. Her presence was firm, like a tree rooted through stone. She did not stare. She did not ask questions. She simply handed her a bowl of warm food and motioned for her to sit. The simple act unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. Kindness, when you expect pain, feels like a trap. She ate slowly, waiting for the price that never came. Iron Willow watched her, not with suspicion, but with a knowing look, as if she had seen many broken arrivals before. When the bowl was empty, Iron Willow spoke softly, telling her that this land does not judge the color of skin, only the weight of one's spirit. Those words followed her through the day. She learned where water was drawn, where fires were fed, where children played under watchful eyes. No one called her cursed. No one pointed. Some looked curious. Others looked cautious. All looked human. Yet Red Hawk remained distant, moving through the camp like a shadow cast by the mountains. When he spoke, people listened. When he passed, conversations softened. Power followed him quietly without force. By afternoon, she noticed scars on the land. Burned patches of earth. Broken arrows left near the riverbank. Signs of tension that did not belong to peace. This was not a place untouched by conflict. It was a place that endured it. She wondered what enemies watched these borders waiting. She wondered if she herself was another threat carried into Red Hawk's home under the mask of marriage. As the sun lowered, a Red Hawk called her to walk with him. Not a command, not a request. A simple motion of the hand. Her heart tightened, but she followed. They walked beyond the camp, toward a ridge that overlooked the valley. From there, the world spread wide and endless. He spoke of the land, of how his father and his father before him had guarded it. He spoke of settlers who pushed too far, of broken promises. Blood spilled 4 lines drawn by strangers. He did not speak of her father. He did not speak of the bargain. That silence pressed harder than words. She listened, understanding that this feared Apache carried more than war on his shoulders. He carried memory, loss, responsibility. When he finally looked at her, he asked only one question. "Why did they fear you?" She answered with the truth. Because lies had never saved her. She spoke of her birth, of the sun that burned her skin, of the way people turned stories into weapons. She told him how fear had shaped her life long before she understood it. Red Hawk listened without interruption. When she finished, he nodded once, as if filing away a piece of the world that now belonged to him. That night, the drums sounded again, louder, restless. A scout returned with news carried like a wound. Another tribe moved near the eastern edge. Old grudges stirred. Red Hawk gathered his council. Voices rose and fell like wind through stone. She sat alone, feeling the truth settle heavy in her chest. She was not just a wife sent for peace. She was now tied to a leader standing at the edge of another storm. In the days that followed, whispers moved through the camp. Some questioned the union. Some feared it angered the spirits. Others believed fate had brought her here for a reason not yet known. Iron Willow stood firm beside her, teaching her the ways of the land, the meaning behind symbols painted on stone and skin. Through Iron Willow, she learned that strength did not always shout. Sometimes it waited. Red Hawk trained with his warriors at dawn. She watched from a distance as he moved with focus and restraint. Every strike carried discipline, not rage. She saw men who trusted him with their lives. That trust was earned, not demanded. It made her wonder why the stories told by settlers had twisted him into something monstrous. One evening, a child approached her, fearless, offering a small carved figure shaped like a bird. The child said Red Hawk told them she belonged here now. The words struck her harder than any insult ever had. Belonging was a language she had never spoken. She held the figure tight, afraid that accepting it would invite loss. Yet danger pressed closer. Riders were seen near the horizon. Fires burned where they should not. Red Hawk grew quieter, his gaze always measuring distance and time. She sensed a choice forming, one that would test every bond in this place. She feared that when that choice came, her presence would tip the balance toward blood. One night, unable to sleep, she stepped outside and found Red Hawk standing alone, staring at the stars. He told her the old stories say the stars watch over those who walk between worlds. Those marked by difference often carry change. She did not know whether to hear hope or warning in his voice. As the wind shifted and the land held its breath, she realized her fate was no longer her own. Whatever storm was coming, it would not ask whether she was ready. And somewhere beyond the dark hills, forces were moving that would soon test whether this feared Apache and the Pale, woman sent to him as a curse, were bound by weakness or something far stronger. The warning came at dawn, carried by a boy whose horse collapsed before the words fully left his mouth. Riders from the east had crossed the river. Not scouts. Not wanderers. Armed men moving with purpose. The camp shifted at once, like an animal sensing a blade. Fires were put low. Children were drawn close. Warriors moved without shouting, each knowing where to stand. Red Hawk listened, his face still, but his jaw tightened in a way she had not seen before. From the edge of the camp, she watched the preparations, feeling the old weight return to her chest. Fear had followed her all her life, changing shape but never leaving. In the settlement, fear had worn the face of neighbors and bloodkin. Here, it wore the shape of an unseen enemy and an uncertain future. She wondered if her arrival had stirred something that should have remained buried. Some part of her, still believed disaster, followed her footsteps. Iron Willow found her near the river, staring at the current as if it might offer answers. The older woman spoke carefully, choosing words like stones placed in a crossing. She said conflict had been circling this land long before her pale feet touched the dust. Old wounds reopened easily when pressure returned. Yet even as Iron Willow spoke, her eyes searched the horizon, and that search betrayed worry. Red Hawk called a council before the sun reached its height. Voices clashed like flint. Some demanded a show of strength. Others urged patience. One warrior, Black Coyote, spoke sharply, his gaze flicking toward her before returning to Red Hawk. He questioned whether the spirits would stand with them while a woman marked by omen lived among their leader's household. The words struck harder because they echoed the fears. She had tried to leave behind, Red Hawk answered without raising his voice. He said, strength measured by fear alone always failed. He said the land chose who stood upon it, not rumor or superstition. His defense did not erase doubt, but it drew a line. The council ended without agreement, tension hanging like heat before lightning. That night, she dreamed of fire moving across the plains. Not burning, but changing everything it touched. She woke with the taste of ash in her mouth and the sense that time was tightening. Outside, Red Hawk spoke quietly with his guards. The camp slept lightly, as if even dreams had learned to listen. As days passed, the threat did not strike, which made it worse. Waiting stretched nerves thin. Scouts returned with fragments of information that never formed a full picture. Another tribe sought passage through Apache land. Settlers had armed themselves farther south. Trade routes shifted like sand. Each piece alone meant little. Together, they whispered of a larger design. She found herself caught between worlds once again. Some of the women welcomed her, teaching her how to grind grain, how to wrap cloth against the cold desert night. Others kept their distance, polite but guarded. Children treated her as something new rather than something wrong, which confused her more than open rejection. With Red Hawk, her place remained undefined. He protected her publicly but spoke little in private. The distance between them felt deliberate, as if he feared what closeness might cost them both. One afternoon, Black Coyote approached her near the corrals. His voice was not unkind, but it carried iron beneath the calm. He asked her if she understood what her presence meant in a time like this. He spoke of enemies who watched for weakness, of symbols that could be turned against them. She answered honestly, saying she understood too well what it meant to be used as a sign of misfortune. She did not know if her words reached him, but he left with a look that held less anger and more uncertainty. Beyond the camp, settlers gathered their own strength. Her father's settlement was not far, and rumors traveled faster than horses. She imagined her father hearing of Apache movements, of alliances forming. Of the daughter he had given away now, standing at the center of rising tension, she wondered if regret ever visited him, or if fear still ruled his choices. One evening, a trader arrived under a white cloth, carrying news wrapped in caution. Settlers feared an Apache strike and were calling for help from distant forts. Lies thickened with each retelling. Red Hawk listened, eyes dark, weighing the cost of silence against the cost of action. She realized then that peace was not the absence of war, but a fragile thing guarded by constant effort. Later, Red Hawk finally spoke to her without the walls of duty between them. He told her leadership was a path walked alone, even among allies. Every decision cut two ways. He admitted that some would blame her if blood was spilled, not because she caused it, but because people needed something simple to blame. The truth did not soften the fear, but it sharpened her resolve. She began to help where she could. Carrying water, tending wounds, learning the rhythm of the camp, she refused to hide. Each small act felt like a claim staked quietly in the ground. Iron Willow watched her with approval, saying that courage often looked like persistence rather than battle. The enemy finally revealed itself in fragments. A skirmish near the eastern ridge. An arrow found in the dirt marked with a symbol older than the current dispute. Red Hawk studied it long into the night. He said nothing, but his silence carried weight. This was no simple clash over land. It was something tied to honor. Two old blood debts that did not fade easily. As preparations for possible conflict intensified, so did the whispers. Some said the pale woman was a test sent by the spirits. Others said she was a warning. She heard both and carried them like stones in her pockets. Heavy, unavoidable. On a quiet morning, she stood on the ridge where Red Hawk had first spoken to her of the land. The valley below looked peaceful, betraying nothing of the tension woven into its soil. She understood then that whatever came next would demand more than survival. It would demand choice. And when the moment arrived, there would be no place left to hide behind fear or legend far off. Dust rose against the horizon, thin but unmistakable. Riders moved again. The land seemed to draw a long breath, holding it. She closed her eyes, feeling the pull of two worlds on her shoulders, knowing that the storm was no longer circling. It was coming. The dust on the horizon grew thicker with each passing hour, until it no longer looked like a trick of light. Riders were coming, slow and deliberate, as if they wanted to be seen. The camp moved into a state of quiet urgency. Weapons were checked. Fires were kept low. Even the children sensed the change and stayed close to their mothers. The land itself seemed to tighten, every sound sharper, every shadow longer. Red Hawk stood at the center of it all, calm but alert, like a bow drawn to its limit. He sent scouts wide, not just to watch the riders, but to read the land itself. He knew enemies often spoke through silence before they ever spoke with force. She watched him from a distance, seeing the weight of leadership press deeper into his shoulders. For the first time, she understood that fear followed him too, just shaped differently. Iron Willow came to her before nightfall and pressed a small bundle into her hands. Inside was a strip of leather marked with symbols of protection and endurance. Iron Willow told her this land respected those who stood their ground with an open heart. The words felt like a challenge and a blessing at once. She tied the leather around her wrist, not knowing if it would change fate, but needing to believe that choice still mattered. As darkness settled, the scouts returned. The riders were not a single threat, but many threads pulled together. A rival tribe seeking old revenge, settlers stirring panic, hoping to push Apache forces into a reckless move. Even whispers of a bounty offered for Red Hawk himself. The realization settled heavily among the council. This was not a storm that would pass on its own. It had been built piece by piece, fed by fear and lies. Black Coyote argued for striking first, his voice edged with urgency. He feared hesitation would be read as weakness. Others urged restraint, warning that one wrong move could ignite a war that would consume more than land. Red Hawk listened, his eyes moving from face to face. When he finally spoke, he said they would defend, not provoke. He said their strength lay in unity, not fury. The decision did not satisfy everyone, but it held. That night, sleep came in fragments. She sat near the fire, staring into the embers, feeling the familiar pull of guilt. If she had not been sent here, would these threats still gather? Or had her presence sharpened every fear already waiting beneath the surface? Red Hawk joined her quietly. He did not speak of strategy. Instead, he told her of his childhood, of a time before he carried the weight of legend. He spoke of laughter, of loss, of the moment he realized leadership meant sacrificing parts of himself for others. She told him of her own childhood, of learning to move through the world like a shadow, of shrinking so others would feel safer. Their stories did not erase the tension between them, but they built a fragile bridge across it. For the first time, she felt seen not as a symbol, but as a person. At dawn, the riders stopped within sight of the camp. They did not attack. They waited. The standoff stretched hours, each side measuring the other. Messages were sent and returned, layered with threats wrapped in courtesy. Red Hawk refused to be baited. His restraint frustrated those who hoped for chaos. Meanwhile, whispers inside the camp grew sharper. Some feared that patience would lead to siege and starvation. Others feared betrayal. Eyes turned toward her more often, not always with blame, but with expectation. She realized that silence would no longer protect her. If she remained only an observer, the story would be written without her. When a small group of settlers approached under a sign of parley, Red Hawk agreed to meet them. She surprised everyone by asking to go with him. The request sent ripples through the council. Black Coyote objected, warning it was dangerous. Iron Willow watched closely, saying nothing. Red Hawk studied her face, searching for hesitation. He found none. The meeting was tense. The settlers spoke of fear, of rumors spread faster than truth. They accused the Apache of preparing an attack. Red Hawk countered calmly, pointing out that fear had been fed deliberately by those who profited from conflict. When tempers rose, she spoke. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. She told them she had lived among them, and now lived here. She said fear had shaped her life on both sides, and it had never brought safety, only loss. Her words did not resolve the dispute, but they shifted it. The settlers left unsettled, forced to question a story that painted the Apache as monsters. Within the camp, reactions were mixed. Some admired her courage. Others worried she had exposed weakness. Red Hawk thanked her privately, telling her that sometimes truths unsettled enemies more than arrows ever could. The days that followed felt like walking on a blade. Supplies ran low. Scouts reported movement on all sides. A single spark could still ignite everything. Yet something subtle began to change. The rival tribe delayed. The settlers hesitated. Doubt crept into plans built on certainty. Then came the night of fire. Not an attack, but a signal. A blaze lit far from the camp, meant to draw Apache warriors out. Red Hawk recognized the tactic and refused to move. He knew patience was their strongest weapon, but not everyone agreed. A small group slipped away under cover of darkness, driven by fear and pride. When news reached the camp at dawn, tensions snapped tight. Those warriors had walked into a trap. Red Hawk prepared to intervene, knowing delay could cost lives. She stood before him, fear and resolve tangled in her chest. She told him that if he went to save them, he must go not as a feared Apache leader, but as a protector willing to end this cycle. He looked at her.
Ow!
Really looked, and something unspoken passed between them. He ordered a controlled response, not a charge. Iron Willow organized the camp for defense. Black Coyote volunteered to ride ahead, his earlier doubts giving way to loyalty. As Red Hawk prepared to leave, she placed her hand on his arm. The gesture was small, but heavy with meaning. She told him that whatever happened, the story did not have to end in blood and blame. He nodded, carrying her words with him as he rode out. From the ridge, she watched dust rise again, this time closer, faster. The land held its breath. Somewhere beyond sight, choices were colliding. She did not know if courage and restraint would be enough. But for the first time in her life, she felt she was standing at the edge of change, not as a curse, but as someone who mattered. As the sound of distant hooves echoed across the valley, the air thick with anticipation, she tightened the leather around her wrist and whispered a promise to the land and to herself. Whatever the outcome, she would not disappear quietly again. The moment that would decide everything was almost here. The clash that everyone feared did not come as a roar, but as a sharp moment of truth. Red Hawk and his riders reached the trap before it could close. The rival warriors were there, tense and ready, but uncertain. They had expected rage. They had expected a charge driven by pride. What they faced instead was control. Red Hawk rode forward alone, dismounted, and stood with his hands open, his weapon resting on the ground. The silence that followed weighed heavier than shouting ever could. Black Coyote watched closely, ready to act, yet holding himself back with effort. Red Hawk spoke of old blood debts and how they had already cost too much. He named the lies spread by settlers who wished to profit from chaos. He did not deny past wrongs, but he refused to let them decide the future. His voice carried across the space between them, steady and unbroken. The rival leader, Stone Bear, stepped forward. His face showed years of loss carved deep. He spoke of sons buried and land taken. His anger was real, but so was his exhaustion. For a long moment, it seemed words would fail. Then Stone Bear lowered his weapon. He said he was tired of fighting shadows cast by other men's greed. Behind them, settlers watching from afar realized the fire they lit would not burn the way they planned. Fear shifted into doubt. Without the expected violence, their story collapsed under its own weight. They withdrew quietly, knowing the land had not chosen their side. When Red Hawk returned to the camp with all his riders alive, relief spread like rain across dry ground. Iron Willow closed her eyes in gratitude. Black Coyote bowed his head to Red Hawk, respect earned anew. The pale woman standing at the ridge felt her knees weaken as the weight she had carried for so long finally began to lift. In the days that followed, talks replaced threats. Stone Bear's people agreed to clear boundaries and shared passage. Trade resumed with caution but hope. Settlers, seeing unity where they expected fracture, grew careful. The story they told about the feared Apache leader began to change. Carried by those who had watched restraint defeat bloodshed, within the camp, eyes turned toward her with something new. Not suspicion. Not fear. Recognition. Iron Willow told her that some people are born to stand between worlds, not to be crushed by them, but to reshape them. Children ran freely now, laughter returning to places where whispers once lived. Red Hawk spoke before the council, honoring the warriors who held their ground without striking first. He acknowledged Black Coyote's courage and the wisdom of Iron Willow. Then he spoke her name, clear and firm, and said the land had accepted her as it accepts rain and fire, each in their time. The words sealed what actions had already proven later. As the sun lowered and the valley glowed with warmth, Red Hawk walked with her beyond the camp. He told her that leadership had taught him many things, but trusting change had been the hardest. He admitted he had kept distance not from doubt in her, but from fear of hope. She answered that she had spent her life fearing the sun, only to learn that light could also heal. Their bond did not form in a single moment, but in shared days. In laughter over simple meals, in silence that felt safe. She learned the songs of the land. He learned the quiet strength of someone who survived without hardening her heart. Together, it became something stronger than the legends that once trapped them. News eventually reached her father's settlement. The feared Apache had not brought destruction. The pale daughter sent away as a curse now stood at the center of peace. Some felt shame. Others felt relief. Her father, older and quieter, heard the truth carried by traders and riders. He never came. But he sent a message carried by a young courier. It held no excuses, only regret. She read it by firelight and felt a chapter close without needing an answer. Seasons turned. The land healed where it could. Boundaries held because they were respected, not enforced by fear. Trade paths reopened. Stories shifted, carried by voices that had once spread lies. Red Hawk remained watchful, knowing peace required care. She stood beside him, no longer hiding from the sun, her skin protected, her spirit unafraid. One evening, as the camp gathered under a wide sky, Iron Willow placed a woven blanket around her shoulders, marking her place among them. The gesture drew quiet approval. She realized then that belonging was not given by blood alone, but by choice, courage, and time. The feared Apache leader was feared no longer in the same way. He became known as a man who chose wisdom over war. The albino woman once cast out became known as a bridge, not a burden. Together they proved that stories written by fear could be rewritten by truth. As the fire burned low and stars filled the sky, she rested her head against Red Hawk's shoulder. The land breathed easy around them. The past no longer chased her. The future no longer threatened him. They had not erased pain, but they had transformed it into something that could hold hope. And in that old American land of dust and memory, where curses were once believed stronger than compassion, a new story took root. One where strength was measured by restraint, and love grew not from force, but from understanding.